I'm Lena Harper. I'm 31, recently unemployed. And until about an hour ago, I was the senior client liaison at one of the most prestigious PR firms in Chicago. That might sound impressive on paper, but prestige doesn't mean protection, not when the people in charge have already decided who you are and what you're not allowed to become. They told me right after Elise Carter's funeral. No coffee, no warning. Just a thin folder and a line that started with corporate regret and ended with, "You're no longer needed." I didn't flinch. I didn't cry or argue or ask why. I just nodded, picked up the folder and walked out. The hallway felt longer than usual as I passed faces that couldn't quite meet my eyes. Some were surprised. Some looked away embarrassed. A few looked satisfied. Office politics is rarely subtle. I carried the box they'd so helpfully provided and stepped into the elevator without a word. Here's what they didn't know: I had already resigned that morning. Sent by certified mail, time-stamped and tracked. Before they could get rid of me, I'd already left them behind. I didn't do it out of spite. It was a strategy. Elise would have called it poetic timing. She would have smiled, maybe raised an eyebrow, and said something like, "Took you long enough." Elise always had that edge to her, calm on the outside but razor sharp beneath. She knew this place better than anyone. She saw what it was. And she saw what I was becoming. The funeral had been tasteful. Speeches, flowers, strategic tears. Our CEO managed to turn her death into a lesson on legacy and transition. Bryce, my direct manager, gave a short statement and then spent the reception glancing at his phone. The only real moment came when Elise's sister read a letter Elise had written for her daughters. I remember thinking then, "You didn't leave quietly. You were never going to." They gave me the termination paperwork before noon. By 1, I was gone. No send-off, no card, not even a fake hug. But I didn't need any of that. Because as I stepped out of the revolving doors for the last time, I didn't feel regret or fear. I felt free. Not the kind of freedom you get by accident, but the kind you earn by choosing yourself when nobody else will. I paused outside just for a moment as the wind pulled at my coat and the late autumn sun broke through the clouds. Then I smiled. A small one. The kind you give when you know something they don't. The kind that says this isn't the end. Not even close. It was late on a Thursday when Elise called me into her office. Most of the floor had already cleared out, leaving behind that quiet hum of after-hours stillness. I thought I was in trouble. I'd just sent an internal memo challenging a proposed strategy that the senior team had already approved, and I expected at least a scolding. Instead, Elise gestured for me to sit and pushed a glass of water toward me. She didn't start with small talk. She never did. She just looked at me like she was trying to measure whether I was ready to hear something important. "They're never going to promote you." That was the first thing she said. I didn't move. I think some part of me had known that already, but hearing it out loud felt like stepping into cold water without warning. It's not because you're not qualified. It's not because you don't outperform your peers. It's because you don't bend. She said it quietly, like it wasn't anger or bitterness anymore, just a fact. Something she'd had to accept years ago. She told me about her own early years at the firm, how she came in, blazing over delivering, taking on impossible clients and making them loyal. But the more capable she became, the less invited she was. The rooms grew smaller, the praise got vaguer. The expectations rose, but the rewards didn't follow. I asked why she stayed. Her eyes softened in a way I hadn't seen before. Because for a while I thought I could change it from the inside. But the higher I climbed, the clearer it got. The rules weren't broken. They were built like this on purpose. We sat in silence for a while. The kind that isn't awkward, just heavy. Shared. Like both of us were staring through the same pane of glass, knowing exactly where it would stop us, no matter how high we jumped. That was the moment things shifted between us. She stopped seeing me as just another young talent with ambition, and I stopped seeing her as just another executive who'd made peace with compromise. We understood each other, not as colleagues, but as women who knew exactly how invisible a ceiling could be, until your head hit it. She called me into her office again a few weeks after that first conversation. This time there was no glass of water waiting, just a manila envelope on her desk and an expression I couldn't quite read. She told me she was dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The words landed like a soft thud, not loud but impossible to ignore. I didn't say anything at first. My brain was still trying to reject the information as if silence could undo it. I asked who else knew. She shook her head. Just her doctor and now me. It was the kind of trust that doesn't come from sentiment but from strategy. She didn't need comfort. She needed a partner. That's when she told me her plan. 17 clients. Quietly, methodically, she would begin transitioning them to me. Officially, I'd be shadowing her, offering support. Internally, we'd keep it low profile, just 2 colleagues collaborating. Every meeting was purposeful. Every introduction is carefully phrased. She called me her right hand. Her clients, mostly founders and small business owners, trusted her deeply, and by extension, they began to trust me. No one at the company noticed. They were too busy chasing headlines and high-profile accounts. Elise's clients weren't flashy, but they were consistent, loyal, and valuable in ways spreadsheets rarely captured. We worked like that for months, coordinated but quiet. She kept records of every meeting, every signed consent, and every transfer detail. We used her personal attorney, not the company's legal team. She covered the filing fees herself. When I asked why she was going to such lengths, she said something I never forgot. Because when I'm gone, they'll come for what I built. And I want to make sure it's already gone by the time they get here. There was fear in her voice, but not for herself. It was fear for me. And behind that, something even stronger. Faith. Not the kind you say out loud, the kind you prove through action. She was handing me everything she couldn't protect anymore, and trusting I would. I mailed my resignation letter at 7:42 that morning. Certified, time-stamped, fully documented. I didn't hand it in at the office. I didn't want them to see it coming. Letting them think they were in control was part of the plan. The LLC paperwork had been filed 3 weeks earlier. I used a different name, a private P.O. box, and a lawyer Elise had recommended months before her diagnosis. The office I leased wasn't glamorous, but it had 2 things that mattered most: a reliable Wi-Fi connection and a 5-minute walk to 5 of our now my clients. I furnished it myself. A borrowed desk, 2 chairs from a discount warehouse, and a secondhand coffee machine that hissed like it had secrets. Elise would have hated the carpet, but she would have loved the location. Waterfront view, ground floor, easy access. I didn't announce anything. I didn't update LinkedIn. I just began reaching out to the clients one by one, not to poach them, not to pitch. Just to say I was still here, and if they needed anything, my number hadn't changed. Most of them had already guessed. Elise had prepared them without ever saying the words. She'd framed it as succession planning. A safety net. Something small business owners appreciate more than anyone else. I wasn't building a company yet. I was building continuity. Familiar voices, trusted faces. The things spreadsheets forget to measure. Each step was deliberate, never loud. Every choice is quiet, but strategic. I kept my head down during my final week at the old firm. While they whispered about my pending termination, I attended client dinners, sent follow-up notes, and cleared out my personal files. I smiled through it all, let them underestimate me. By the time Bryce called me into his office with that smug little pause before saying, "Eliminated," I was already gone. They thought they'd cornered me. I'd spent 6 months rearranging the walls. That's the thing no one teaches you in corporate. You don't fight the system by throwing punches. You bleed it slowly, patiently, with planning, timing, and the kind of calm that makes them wonder what you're not saying. When I walked out that day with my little cardboard box, it wasn't an ending. It was a handoff. One Elise had started, one I intended to finish. On my terms. It started with a phone call from Zara, the founder of a boutique skincare brand. She sounded calm, but her words were precise. Someone from my old firm had reached out, said there was confusion about her account, and offered a 40% discount if she returned. That same afternoon, Matteo from the packaging startup texted me. Same pitch, different executive. They were moving fast, calling clients one by one, offering deals they never would have considered months earlier. Panic was setting in on their side. I could feel it. By the end of the week, 10 of the 17 had contacted me. Some were amused. Others were concerned. A few were outright confused. Most said the same thing. They trusted me, but they didn't like being pulled into a fight. That was the danger. The company wasn't just dangling discounts. They were casting doubt. They hinted I'd acted outside my authority. Those contracts signed under Elise were invalid. That staying with me could mean legal complications down the line. I didn't panic. I scheduled coffee meetings. I showed up at the offices with client reports and ideas tailored to their goals. I reminded them of what Elise had taught me. The difference between a vendor and a partner, between service and investment. Every client got personal attention, real support. I offered no discounts, no gimmicks, just strategy consistency and the calm confidence of someone who knew these businesses better than any spreadsheet ever would. They tried again the following week, this time with emails, formal sounding. Legalese wrapped in concern. My lawyer reviewed them and called them what they were. Empty threats. Smoke. Still, it was working. Some clients hesitated. I could hear it in their voices. So I shifted focus. I didn't defend. I demonstrated. Instead of rebutting their claims, I delivered results, connections, introductions, growth. The more they pushed, the more obvious the difference became. The company was offering numbers. I was offering value. They were reacting. I was building. By the third week, only 2 clients remained undecided. One was holding out for loyalty, the other for leverage. Both would make their choices soon enough. But I wasn't waiting. I kept moving, meeting, planning, listening, because that's what they never understood. You can't steal loyalty, you can't threaten trust, and no amount of discounting can replace what Elise spent 15 years creating. This wasn't about undercutting them. It was about outlasting them. Quietly. Strategically. One relationship at a time. The key was taped to the inside flap of an envelope labeled simply for after. Elise's handwriting was unmistakable. Strong, slanted, deliberate. I found the safe deposit box 2 days later at a quiet downtown branch she once mentioned in passing. Inside was a leather portfolio, heavier than I expected. No USB, no hard drive, just pages, dozens of them. Some typed, others printed emails, handwritten notes in the margins. Color-coded tabs, paper clips, sticky notes so old their edges had curled. I sat in the corner of the vault room and started reading. It wasn't just about Elise's clients. It was about everything. Overbilling patterns, contract manipulations, inflated performance reports, bonuses paid out on false projections, executive travel labeled as client expenses, donations rerouted through shell vendors. Each page is built on the last. At first, I thought she'd hired a forensic accountant. The documentation was that precise. But then, I recognized her shorthand, the little arrows and side comments she always scribbled during board meetings. This wasn't outsourced. She'd done it herself. Quietly, over the years. There were emails she was never supposed to see, meeting transcripts that were never recorded, memos were altered between draft and final. Each document marked a breadcrumb she'd followed deeper into the maze. She'd tried to stop it the right way. There were copies of complaints she filed, letters sent to legal, and notes from private meetings with the board, and responses, or the lack of them. She'd been ignored, dismissed, then punished. Her budget was slashed, her team reassigned, promotions blocked. It was all there, not just corruption, retaliation, systemic. I closed the folder after an hour, unable to take in more. My hands felt numb, not from fear, but from the weight of what I now carried. This wasn't just evidence. It was a loaded gun pointed at a house of glass. I thought this had started as revenge, a chance to escape a broken system and build something of my own. But Elise had never been after escape. She was after exposure. She didn't want to survive it. She wanted to end it. And now that task was mine, not just to honor her, but to finish what she'd started. Quietly, completely, on record. I handed everything over to Laura, the attorney Elise had trusted from the start. No press, no drama, just a quiet meeting in her office with a second guest. I hadn't expected, an investigator from the Financial Crimes Division. He didn't smile, didn't shake hands, just opened a notebook and said, "Begin." We went through every document. Contract discrepancies, falsified reports, internal emails Elise had flagged in red. He didn't say much, but his pen didn't stop moving. When we finished, he looked at me and said it plainly. "This isn't just unethical. It's criminal." The first article hit 4 days later. A small blurb in the business section about a pending investigation. 2 paragraphs, no names. But it was enough. The next morning, their stock dipped 6% before the market even opened. By noon, it hit double digits. Clients called. Some angry, some curious, some just wanting to know what I knew. I said only what I needed to. That integrity matters. That Elise always believed truth has weight. That weight was finally tipping. By the end of the week, 3 senior executives had been placed on leave. 1 quietly resigned. The CEO issued a bland statement about full cooperation, but no one was buying it anymore. Elise hadn't just documented fraud. She had mapped their entire architecture of deceit. News outlets picked it up next. Local at first, then national. Words like whistleblower, embezzlement, and class action started trending. Every hour, another piece unraveled, and each time it did, I thought of Elise. She hadn't left me clients. She'd left me a fuse. All I had to do was light it. And now the fire was moving faster than anyone could contain. The board tried to spin it. They blamed rogue actors, claimed surprise. But Elise had been thorough. Her records traced approvals back to every executive, every bonus, every manipulated forecast. There were no scapegoats big enough to bury this. When Bryce was escorted from the building on a Friday afternoon, I watched the live stream from my small office with the doors shut and the blinds open. He didn't look angry. He looked stunned. Like the system he thought was untouchable had finally answered for itself. Justice didn't come with fireworks. It came in tailored suits, sealed warrants, and statements that began with effective immediately. Elise knew that. She hadn't wanted revenge, she'd wanted accountability. And she'd gotten it, not for her, not even for me, but for every voice that had been ignored, every warning that had been buried. Every woman was told to wait her turn and play the game. The game was over. And for once, the right people had lost. The letter arrived in a thick white envelope with no return address. My name was written in Elise's careful handwriting, the same way she used to sign off on client notes, with just enough pressure to leave an impression. I waited 2 days before opening it, unsure if I was ready to hear her voice again, even on paper. She started simply, "If you're reading this, then you did it." Then she told me why she had chosen me. Not because I was the smartest in the room, though she knew I often was. Not because I followed rules or broke them, but because I asked different questions. Because I cared in ways that didn't fit into profit models and quarterly forecasts. You were never interested in playing the game. That's what made you dangerous. That's also what made you right. She said she saw herself in me, not the version they rewarded, but the one she buried to survive. And that it was time for someone to stop surviving and start building something else. She thanked me, but not with the kind of gratitude that seeks closure. It was the kind of thanks that passes on a torch, a weight, a trust. She asked me to be better, not just than them, but better than she had been forced to become. Her last line read like a whisper. "Don't burn it all down. Just light up what comes next." I folded the letter and sat in silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty. It felt full. Not with grief. With purpose. Elise hadn't left behind a legacy. She left behind a beginning. And it had my name on it. 6 months later, the office sat quietly by the lake, wrapped in early morning light. The sign on the door was simple, understated. Inside, the walls were warm, the coffee was strong, and in the front hallway hung a framed photo of Elise, smiling in grayscale, watching over everything. We now have 5 full-time staff now. A designer who believed in mission-driven branding, a strategist who left a bigger firm for a smaller purpose, and a receptionist who greeted everyone like she already believed in their potential. The clients were steady. Not all flashy, but honest. Businesses that valued people more than press releases. One Tuesday, Bryce showed up at the reception. He looked different. Smaller somehow, not in stature but in presence. He didn't ask for a job. He just asked for a conversation. Said he was learning. Said he wanted to try doing it right this time. I told him we didn't do second chances here. We did new beginnings. I offered him a cup of coffee and asked what he could build, not what he'd lost. He smiled, maybe for the first time in a long while, and nodded. There was no grand speech, no announcement, just a quiet moment of something shifting. That's how it all starts. Small, quiet, real. As I stood in the doorway that afternoon, watching the lake ripple against the shoreline, I thought of Elise, of what she gave me, of what she asked me to carry. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was chasing her shadow. I felt like I was finally walking into my own light.